it for them, or they're doing it?
No, they have. How are you? See you too. So good. I did. No, I did. It's hard though to get back.
It is so hard. Mentally, I'm not good.
What is it?
Thank you. We are live on Channel 20, folks. Thank you for everyone for being here. I'd like to reconvene this panel of the Palm Beach County Delegation and the Palm Beach County School District together. At this time, I'd actually like to ask our delegation members if they'd like to make an introduction of themselves and their staff, if they wouldn't mind. Senator Rader, do you want to make another introduction, or your staff?
I'm pretty good, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Here. Representative Schlossberg.
Oh, I'd like to introduce Representative Emily Schlossberg. I represent House District 91, which runs from Boynton, Delray, and Boca Raton. And I'd like to introduce my legislative assistant, Chris, where are you? Christopher Justs. Okay, Chris, he was here. He's MIA.
Senator Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Lori Berman. I represent Senate District 31, which is Delray to Lake Worth, the ocean mostly to the Turnpike. And I am here with two legislative assistants, Abby Ross and Casey Lewis. Thank you.
Representative Polsky.
Hi, I'm Tina Polsky. I represent District 81, which is the unincorporated areas west of the Turnpike, from Boca to Lake Worth, and then the entire area of the Glades, Pahokee, South Bay, and Belle Glade. And I'm thrilled to introduce, our newest assistant in our office is Dr. Robert Reese, who many of you may know from the Glades, and Alexis Montalvo, who many of you know from previous administrations. Thank you.
Representative Casello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe Casello, representing the Great District 90, incorporates Boynton Beach, Lake Worth, a little bit of Lantana into Green Acres out to the Turnpike. And I'd like to introduce my legislative aide, Mr. Johnny McMahon. You know, he's probably out making phone calls for me. I hope so, because he drove me up here. So.
Thank you, Representative Powell. Casello, we'll get you a ride home.
Thank you.
Senator Powell.
Good afternoon. My name is State Senator Bobby Powell, Jr., representing the northern parts of Palm Beach County. We start in West Palm Beach and head over to Royal Palm, going all the way up the coastline, capturing the best parts of Palm Beach County, inclusive of the city of Palm Beach Gardens, Riviera Beach, North Palm Beach, Jupiter Inlet Colony, Juneau, Palm Beach Shores. And if I forgot you, charge it to my head and not my heart, because I love each and every part of our district. Here today with us, one of the hardest working legislative aides this side of heaven, Nasby Chowdhury. And we're excited to be here to work with you all. And we also represent this campus at Florida Atlantic University. Very, very excited. A life of service is a life that counts.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Caruso.
Senator, I just want to say I just got back from a cruise this morning, and I'm remorse that I didn't vacation in your district. Yeah. I'm Mike Caruso from District 89, the beautiful Palm Beaches. It runs from South Boca Raton, Deerfield line all the way to Singer Island, and kind of hugs the coastline. And I'm happy to be here today, and thanks for coming.
Speaker Magar.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Lynn Magar, and I represent most of Martin County, but here in Palm Beach County, the best part, Jupiter, Tequesta, and Jupiter Inlet Colony. Senator Powell and I share a love for this area, and we share a lot of bills and appropriation requests together, and I know that we'll be working on things together as well. I've got my aide here, Ann Bolduc, in the end. She's the one that keeps the line moving through the office, and I look forward to working with you all and talking about school issues today.
Thank you, Speaker Magar. That was absolutely beautiful what you said, and I appreciate everything about. I'm not sucking up. Representative Cruz, did you have something else? I'm sorry.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I was also remorse in not introducing my legislative aide, Nick Cannon, Captain America over there.
Yeah. My name is Matt Wilhite. I represent District 86. It's from West Palm Beach to Wellington. Tom Valio and Melissa Santoro, my staff that are here, that since I'm last again, I get to say it, are the
Mr.
best
Chair.
aides there are. Yes.
I'm sorry, when you asked me to do introductions, I thought you meant to quiet down, so
Well,
if with your approval, can I introduce myself and my staff?
yes.
Thank you,
absolutely.
Mr. Chair. Senator Kevin Rader, District 29, all of Boca Raton, Highland Beach, parts of Delray and Boynton, all of Belglade and South Bay, and Wellington, all of Wellington, and parts of Broward County as well in my district. With me today is JJ, my practically new legislative assistant, who unfortunately had to take over for my my previous LA, who had personal issues in her family, and we're sad to see Sharonda go, as she was Chris Smith's aide for all about 10 or 12 years when he was in the Senate and the House. I do want to proudly say and let everyone know that I have, when I was in the House, I visited every public school in my district. And in the Senate, I visited almost every public school in my district. You had to give me 3 times longer, 3 times larger district. And I think I learned, I know I learned a lot when you talk to the principals and you walk around the schools and you learn about how the schools operate. And schools in parts of my district are much different than other parts of my district, and it makes me a better member of the Florida legislature.
Thank you, Senator. Chair Barbary, thank you for being here today, you and your members. Congratulations on your recent chairmanship, and hopefully we'll have a great conversation today and about things and what's coming up. And I would like to turn the rest of the meeting over to you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Chairman Wilhite. We're very happy to be here today with all of you. I have some brief comments I would like to make, but before we do that, I've been told by our clerk that we must take roll call. So would, Mrs. Bass, would you please call the roll for the school board?
District 1, Barbara McLean.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
Here.
District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robbins.
Here.
Thank you. So all 7 of us are here. So I appreciate all of you taking the time to be here with us today also. Would you, I'd like to have you start introducing yourselves. Would you start down there at the other end, Mrs. McQuinn?
Barbara McQuinn, School Board Member, District 1.
Erica Whitfield, School Board District 4, and just to follow everyone's guidance, I'll give you a kind of idea where that is. That is West Palm all the way down to Delray and Palm Beach, the beach of Palm Beach all the way over to Military, missing a little section down the middle that Dr. Robinson has.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Brill, and I'm honored to represent District 3, which represents the unincorporated areas from Lake Worth Road through West Boynton Beach, through West Delray Beach, down to the north side of Clintmore Road and Boca Raton. My district is the perfect blend of 55-plus communities and family communities. So I bring to the school district from my district a load of retired teachers, administrators, and educators from the north and the south who serve as our volunteers. Thank you.
And good afternoon. I'm Marcia Andrews, School Board Member for District 6. I'm your Weston leader. The Weston communities start at West Lantana Road, West Lake Worth Road, heading on back into Wellington, Royal Palm Beach, the Acreage, Loxahatchee, and all the way back through Arden to Canal Point, Pahokee, Belglade, and South Bay. We are known for agriculture. We feed you. We are the agricultural capital of the world. A great place to see all of your food, your vegetables are grown to keep you healthy. I'm your Weston leader. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Deborah Robinson. I represent District 7, which I love to call the urban corridor. I go from North Lake to Linton, for the most part, between the Intracoastal and I-95. Thank you.
Chuck Shaw, District 2. My district is essentially north of Lake Worth Road to North Lake, west of I-95 out to around the turnpike.
Mrs. McQuinn, since we were all advised to try and keep it limited, and there's a map in there showing what our districts are, and you didn't have an opportunity to tell anybody where you're from, so would you like to
I
do
would
that?
love to do that. I share communities with Ms. Magar and, well, we know Bobby Powell.
That's right.
I was his school principal, too.
She was.
Been around a while. He was never in my office, didn't have a clue who I was. I have, I start with North Palm Beach North. So I have Juno Beach, Palm Beach Gardens. I'm going to leave something out, Jupiter Inlet Colony, Jupiter, and Tequesta. So again, I'm pleased to share that geography lesson with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McQuinn. Frank Barbieri, District 5, and I want to thank Chairman Wilhite for allowing me to put 120 miles on my truck today because my district is about as far away from this end of the county as it can possibly be. I represent the south end of the county, which is the city of Boca and the western Boca area. So I'm pleased to be up here because I don't get to see Mrs. McQuinn's district very often up at this end of the county. In the package that the district provided to all of you today, you will find a multi-page discussion of all of our legislative priorities. But we were asked to focus in on the three main priorities that we would like to make you aware of today and get your help with when you're up in Tallahassee. And those three things are school safety, mental health, school finance, and school construction. So our objective in today's meeting is to give you as full understanding of those three priorities as possible and to provide you with the opportunity to ask all the questions you might want to ask so that when you are up there in Tallahassee faced with a bill that affects us, not only do you know how we want you to vote, you know why we want you to vote the way we're asking you to vote. And to ensure that we use our time properly today or prudently today to make sure we get through the pretty tight schedule, we've asked three of the district's executive leadership team to provide that information to you. So you're first going to hear from Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald, who will share the great accomplishments of our district, followed by our Chief Financial Officer, Mike Burke, who will touch on school safety and mental health and the dollars involved with that, as well as school finance in general. And then our Chief Operating Officer, Wanda Paul, will talk about school construction and our challenges on that front. Unfortunately, Superintendent Fenoy wanted to be here today, but he's traveling out of state on school board business, and that was planned before we could do anything about rescheduling that. So I apologize on his behalf for him not being here today with you. Also with us today are two districts, two lobbyists, which are around the face, which I'm sure all of you know. He'll be working with you quite often up there in Tallahassee. And we also have our local lobbyist, Rita Solnit, here with us today. You know, over the last couple weeks, or 5 or 6 weeks, I've met with, I think, 7 of the legislators on the delegation, and I know we're scheduled to meet with more of you in the next couple weeks. And one of the comments that I heard from one of the members was that it seems like the only time that we really care to talk to you or to get input from you or to give you input is during the time that we're asking you to help us in Tallahassee. And I just want to make sure that all of you understand that the school board would like to have a totally open communication with all of you. We know you're there all year round, and we are here all year round. And certainly you're welcome to make your comments, your concerns, bring it to the attention of the school district or the school board anytime you have any. If you ever have any questions while you're in Tallahassee, Chairman Wilhite, you can get to all of us, and I want all of you to know that we welcome your calls, we welcome your concerns, so if you see anything that you would like to discuss with us, please let us know.
Mr. Chair, what were the 3 things that you said that you wanted to discuss? I didn't.
School
I can't
safety,
find
mental
the
health,
agenda.
school finance, and school construction.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Oh, yeah, it's,
I also want to
Thanks.
point out we have a few of our other executive team leaders here today. We have our District Chief of Staff, Amity Schuyler, our General Counsel, Julianne Rico, our Assistant Superintendent of Choice and Innovation, Dr. Peter Licata, our Chief of Human Resources, Dr. Gonzalo Lacava, and Claudia Shea, who I think all of you know. She's our Director of Communications.
Oh, nice. Mr. Chair.
Police Chief. And of course, we can't forget our wonderful police chief that we stole from this end of the county. He was the Jupiter Police Chief, Frank Kitzrow.
Mr. Chair, one more.
Yes, Senator.
All the legislators, we introduced our staff, but Representative Al Jaquette, who is not here today, his staff member, Kesnel Theus, is here. I just wanted to make sure people knew that so that if they have any issues that involve Representative Jaquette in his district, which almost mirrors District 7, he's available here today as well.
Thank you. With your permission, Chairman Wilhite, we'll start the presentation with Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald.
And good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. Superintendent Fenoy does look forward to meeting with each of you that he hasn't met with yet or seen you up in Tallahassee. So before we go into those 3 priority areas, we do want to kind of give you a little update of how the school district has done since the last time we met. This school board, a number of years back, set a very robust vision and mission statement. It's up here on the screen. You can see we have been working very diligently about providing that world-class education for all of our students here in Palm Beach County. In particular, just draw your attention through a lens of equity. And how we did that, a number of years, about 3.5 years ago, we went out to the community to develop our strategic plan. Many of you participated in conversations, and we landed here with what you see up here. I don't think this is probably the first time you've seen this strategic plan. We have, in particular, 4 long-term outcomes that we're focused in on: 3rd grade reading, high school readiness, graduation rate. And not only do we want to look at graduation rate, but our 4th long-term outcomes really zeroes in how are our students doing once they leave us. So how are they doing if they're going into college, our universities, or if they're going directly into the workforce. So you'd be pleased to announce that last year I hope this isn't the first time you heard, but that Palm Beach County School District is an A-rated school district. Yes, that deserves applause. Anybody? Very proud that we're leading the other urban districts in a number of areas: math, science, learning gains in math, as well as high school graduation rate. Going a little bit deeper, in particular, when we compare ourselves to the other urban districts, which we often do, we lead in the 4 big areas, 3 of those areas, and tied for 2nd in English language arts. When you look at the points that it takes to become an A-rated school district, we are at the top, just followed by Miami-Dade. So we're very proud of the work that's happening in the schools on this piece. In particular, what we're very, very proud of, you just heard during the holiday break, the graduation rates came out, thanks to the great work of our high schools, our teachers, our community partners. A whopping 91.7% of district-operated schools graduation rate. Just take that in for a minute, 91.7% of district-operated schools. Great increases across the board in the last 5 years. Just more and more kids are just doing good work thanks to those partners. So our first priority, jumping in, is around school safety and student mental health. So here we're really asking for to maintain the current funding. You know, we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of one of the worst tragedies that ever happened here in the state of Florida. And we're asking some good that has come out of this is some funding that's really allocated, allow us to do some very creative, innovative work. In particular, I want to start with first with student mental health. So our school district received $4.3 million. I want to talk to you about how we use that. After charter school pass-through, we landed with $3.9 million. We spent those dollars in particular with 2 areas. Over time, we have worked with a number of partners around mental health. 31 behavioral health agreements currently exist. We went through a bid process, and through that process, the majority of our dollars are spent with 7 agencies that provided a bid to provide co-located services on our school campuses. When you look at the research, you look at the best practices, the closer access that kids have to mental health professionals, and we know that that happens when they're actually at the school center, they're going to use them. And in just the first semester alone, so we quickly, over the summer, turned this around, and we're in about 55 schools right now that we're staffed with 7 agencies. We're hearing nothing but positives about the principals saying that these people already have a full caseload of kids who really need some serious issues addressed. Our second piece, it was what we call CAPE teams. So these are teams that are mental health professionals that are actually employed by the school district that can go out on those particular threats that come up on a regular basis. Unfortunately, in the world we live in now, this team is going out and supporting our school principals, our teachers, addressing immediately those threats that come in. So again, positive remarks from our school principals to have that team that can come right out. And because of that, we're working very closely with our community partners, the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office Behavioral Health Unit. We work very closely and connect with them on a regular basis. Some of the work that we have had in the past is listed there. I won't, to save time, go into that. We'll save that for the questions at the end. Now I'd like to move over to on the safety aspect. I'm going to ask Mr. Burke, our Chief Financial Officer, will go in a little bit more detail how we spent those dollars.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Our school board has always made a large investment in school safety. We're one of the few districts that has a fully accredited school police department. We've had that for decades. And prior to this year, we had over 150 sworn officers. We took advantage of the additional Safe Schools money to grow our force. We added 75 new positions, which pretty much took all of the $5.8 million additional dollars we picked up. Just to give you some context, we were spending over $20 million a year to operate the existing police force. And at that time, we were receiving about $4.3 million in Safe Schools dollars. With the additional money you put into the Safe Schools in FY19, we're now receiving about $10 million a year. And this year, we're going to spend about $35.6 million to run the police department. And our costs are a little higher because we added the 75 positions immediately after the session ended, but it takes a while to recruit those officers. Chief Kitzrow has done an amazing job. We've now hired 58 of the 75 officers, which has taken a lot of work. And then he partnered with all of our local municipalities and the sheriff to make sure we had coverage on the first day of school, and every one of our schools is required by the Stoneman-Douglas Act. So we're making good use of the money. We've taken some additional measures to protect, high school football games, other things, provide more vehicles for our police officers, and there's a list there on the slide. You can see the details, but we're making good use of that money. I just want to point out that we pass along 100% of the money is owed to our charter schools for both Safe Schools and mental health. Those dollars flowed right through to the charter schools along with the rest of the FFP. In Palm Beach County, you'll see about $153 million is now passing through to our charter schools, and they're serving about 20,000 of our students. One of the main points I want to talk about today is the required local effort. And this is my formal title, required local effort, or you'll hear the acronym RLE. And it truly is a cornerstone of the Florida Education Finance Program, or FEFP. The RLE, along with state sales tax dollars, is really what pays for education in Florida. And then I have a less stuffy, informal working title that I borrowed from the late, great Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, which is RLE, find out what it means to me. And that's what I want you to think about today when I go through this, because there's some parallels. But RLE, it really drives our funding each year. It will probably be the biggest decision you all make this year when you approve a state budget. And I think a lot of you heard from Ms. Baker on January 8th when she gave the revenue outlook. But the RLE, for the last few years, well, in the current year, it's paying for $7.7 billion of the $21 billion roughly education budget in our state. And that's about 37%. If you look back 10 years ago, the RLE used to pay for about 46% of the budget. And I'm going to tell you why that's slipping in a minute here. And it's also, I know you met with the county earlier today, and you've got the League of Cities this afternoon. It's always important to point out the different climate the school board operates in. Our tax rates are really set through the state budget process, through the RLE, and then also, the other aspects of our millage are capped by statute. So the school board really is not as independent as the county government or the municipalities. So the role you play is critical to our funding. The big story is for the past 3 years, we've seen the required local effort rolled back. And you probably already all know this, but the rollback, or is a technical term in taxation, the rollback rate means that you reduce the tax each year to offset any increase in new revenue. It means to really, if property values go up and there's new construction, you reduce the tax rate, so you bring in the exact amount of dollars you had the year before on a dollar-for-dollar basis. So it's a tax cut really to the property owners, but it really limits it takes new revenue off the table really for a big chunk of the education budget. This has been going on since FY16. So the table here on the bottom of the slide just shows you once you start rolling back to the RLE, that means the tax rate itself drops. It's dropped from 4.984 mils to 4.075 mils, which may not sound like a lot, but that's about $1.7 billion in lost revenue opportunities. And you can see the RLE, it's been pretty constant at $7.6 billion for 3 years. And then this year, there was an allowance for new construction, and that allowed the RLE to grow to $7.7 billion. So that did put a little, about 100, a little more money into education. I also put the base student allocation for the last 4 years, so you could see that. That's been relatively flat. It's only grown by 1.2%. over that 3-year span. And then our total funding per student has grown 4.48% over that 3-year span. So those are pretty modest numbers when you look at our recent history. Like I said, this rollback of the RLE, it has a significant financial impact. It's about $1.7 billion this year across the state for all 67 districts, and it's $178 million if you just focus in on Palm Beach County. And this rollback of the RLE is what that's doing is shifting a greater dependence on state revenue to fund education in our state. So if you look at a 10-year comparison, in '09, the state was picking up about 48% of the education budget. That's grown now to 56.51%, and the local share has fallen from 52 to 43.49%. And I bring all this up because you have to kind of think, you guys are always working on a 3-year budget forecast, but you just have to start thinking about how long can we sustain this continued rollback of the RLE? Is this the best thing for Florida? Do we want to get overly dependent on state sales tax that, is also susceptible to economic downturns? We've gone through now over 10 years of economic recovery, so you're hearing more and more economists say, this is going to come to an end at some point. We could be headed for some type of slowdown. The RLE, question 2 at this time, it's not good for teachers. And when you look at Florida, the Department of Education released this year our list of critical shortage areas. I've got them on the slide, but it's English, math, reading, science, ELL, ESE. I mean, that's almost every core subject. I mean, social studies is not on the list, and that's good. I love history, but when I go to the doctor, I hope they had a pretty good math and science teacher too. And when you have this critical shortage, this means we've got more substitutes teaching core subjects. It means we've got higher turnover. We've got uncertified teachers. And as Deputy Superintendent Oswald pointed out, we are the highest performing urban district. We're proud of ourselves. We think we're high performing, but we can do better. And to do better, we need resources. And the most important resource is the teacher in the classroom. And all the research tells us that. So when you think about RLE, think in terms also of what's our teacher situation in Florida, and how sustainable is this going forward? Florida's not an inexpensive place to live. Some studies have come out and said, it's actually ranks 37 out of affordability, so that means 13 states. Only 13 states are cheaper to live in Florida. And Florida's teachers were found to be below the family living wage when you consider the cost of living and their income. I think I've mentioned this before, but as you look ahead to the budget, you really have to think about this. Can we continue to afford to roll back the RLE each year, into the future? Maybe a good parallel is, we also are dependent on sales tax, and we don't roll back the 6% sales tax if the price of a car goes up from year to year. So, you've got the benefit there of some natural growth in your revenue. And Florida is still growing. Our student population has slowed down a little bit, but we're still growing, and that means there's more demands for services. So you need some natural growth in your revenue base. All right, so all we're asking for is a little RLE when you come home, and that's my other, just kind of stealing that again from Ms. Franklin. But please consider, Florida's currently 44th in the country in funding. I just read this week, Texas is 42nd in the country, and their House of Representatives is now looking to maybe increase funding as much as 17% to start boosting their education budget. And Florida and Texas have some similarities, so I'm hopeful that maybe we'll start to see some of a movement like that in Florida for education. Our tax rates are historically low. If you go back 20 years, we had the average district tax rate was at 9.269 mils. We're now at 6.339 mils, which is well below the 10 mil cap. Teachers are not keeping pace with firemen and police officers. And like I mentioned, our school board doesn't have that taxing authority. The county was in earlier. I'm a big fan of our county. They do an excellent job. But just to point out the difference, our county government has been able to levy their same tax rate for the last 8 years. So that means as we recovered from the Great Recession, they've generated more revenue with the boost in the property values, and that allows them to rebuild their reserves. It allows them to provide a salary increase for their sheriff's deputies and other professions that work within the county. Schools have been kind of held back from that recovery, and the RLE is a big part of that. And then another way to look at this is, Florida now has $1 trillion economy. We had the fourth largest gross domestic product of all the 50 states. But when you look at our investment of GDP towards education, we're low. We're at 2.7% of GDP. The median across this country is 3.3%. You would have to increase education funding 27.5% to get to that national median. Now, I know that's not going to happen overnight, but we need to start aspiring to getting closer to that. And this is one way to do it, by allowing the RLE to grow. And also, you've got, in your 3-year budget forecast, you have a structural imbalance in years 2 and 3, which means you don't have enough revenue to meet all your needs. So that's another reason to revisit this RLE policy. And you know, our recommendation, of course, is you allow that to grow with the growth in new construction, property values, et cetera. All right, I appreciate your attention. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Wanda Paul. She's our Chief Operating Officer, and we've got a few issues on the facilities front. Ms. Paul?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be before you. This is my first experience doing this, so bear with me. But I'm going to have several asks of you. The first ask is replace the cost per student station caps that we currently have. It is very difficult in this current climate to build small neighborhood schools. The current system is a huge advantage if you want to build a mega school, but you know, our district has spent a lot of time over the years promoting the neighborhood school concept. And so when we look at the current situation under the Ed Plant survey, which is what we're required to fill out to request permission to build a school, it's very difficult to do it properly for a small school that's between 350, 500 students. Also, we're seeking approval for construction when we submit the Ed Plant survey, that if we're using our local taxpayer dollars or our local capital outlay, that we be exempt from the Ed Plant survey, because we are using local dollars to build. As a general rule, we're required to fill basically all of our seats in our schools. Our problem, being such a large district, is that our seats are not necessarily in the right place. Over time, in an urban environment, you have students and families that move in and out of certain areas, and it's very difficult for us to adjust to that. And so it's a huge disadvantage under the current system to, you know, try to balance it out, do a paperwork drill on paper. That's not our reality. Our kids are moving. We have transient students moving in and out of our county all the time. So, you know, it's very difficult to try to have that perfect solution to build a school in exactly the right place all the time. This is also an example of our recent difficulties in trying to build O5C, as we affectionately call it. It's a Boca Elementary School. And it took many months to try to get to yes in terms of building the school. You know, as you can see on the map, you know, we're the second largest geographic land area in Florida. So we cover a huge land space. We're the third largest overall compared to Miami-Dade and Broward. And the driving distance from south to east is about 50 miles. We struggle currently with the Ed Plant survey requirements. We are a large county, so it's very difficult, as I said before, to try to build under these current requirements. As I said before, the district spent many years trying to reinforce the neighborhood concept. Moving students, as I learned personally from a community meeting, moving students out of their geographical area and their neighborhood is not really a good thing. Our parents in our district are very passionate about their schools and very passionate about their neighborhood. And so it is not probably the best thing to do to approach them and try to say, combine with this school. It makes good business sense, but it's bad for trying to build that neighborhood concept and trying to build community. And then also we got to look at realistic travel times. I'm a parent, I know many of you are parents. You do not want your child to spend an hour on a school bus traversing the county because we don't have seats in the proper space. Our community, as I've learned, is very tied to neighborhood schools, and to take a child out of their neighborhood because there's space 50 minutes away is not really practical. And I don't think we have the appetite for that. The recommended legislation or legislative solution is to revise or append the current ed plant survey to expressly allow large districts to consider the capacity and to have a more regionalized approach to granting permission to build new schools. This will ensure that we keep the continuity and the community aspect of our schools that we hold dearly. And then it also minimizes the impact on transportation and windshield time for our kids spending all that time on a bus. Cost per student station, we recommend that there is a replacement or recalibration. Currently under the current statute, 1013.64, it requires that funds expended in constructing new facilities to not exceed a maximum amount, that's cost per student station. This limits needed class size and in terms of the core areas being libraries and cafeterias. Under this current plan, to try to duplicate the current size that we have in our schools, we can't do it. It basically means that we have smaller libraries, smaller cafeterias, and smaller media centers. So this is not a good thing for kids and for the community. The existing challenges complying with the current cost per student station caps, it forces us to build bigger schools. It forces us to make decisions of moving kids out of their current neighborhood and combining with other schools. Here's an example. You see a 850 square foot classroom. That's what we're currently building. You see under the current plan, the areas in blue and green, those spaces go away. So the new standard would necessitate a 101 square foot student station as opposed to 143 square foot or feet that we currently or previously had built on. So you're losing all your storage space. You have a much smaller footprint and a smaller space for kids to move around in. So the recommended solution we have is basically to replace or recalibrate cost per student station, to look at it more as a cost per square foot type of approach. And then having some type of regional cost adjustment factor included in that so that we can take into account where the school is going to specifically be located. And we recommend that cost per student station or cost per square feet be on a time contract rather than a time of opening to ensure compliance. So we recommend that it be at the time we contract as opposed to when we open the school, and regardless of market escalation. Current situation, the EPS or Ed Plant Survey approval is not required for sales tax referendum projects or operating budget projects. EPS or Ed Plant Survey approval is currently required for projects funded with taxpayer millage funds. The existing process is millage fund expenditures must be published and reviewed in 2 public meetings prior to the taxpayer representing school board being authorized to approve the expenditures. This measure is similar to the operating budget approval process and also addresses the public feedback approval nature of a sales tax referendum. Our recommended legislative solution: revise or append the Ed Plant survey provisions to expressly allow local capital outlay millage as an exemption to the requirement of educational plant survey recommendation. This will ensure the local public are afforded the opportunity to weigh in on the decision if and when a school is needed in their particular area. This does not preclude projects funded with local millage from complying with SREF or cost per student station requirements. Oh, went too fast. So that concludes my presentation at this time, and thank you for listening.
I believe that's all we have to present at this point, other than to answer questions for you all. So, Chairman Wilhite, if you have some questions that you would like to ask our school board members or our administration, we welcome those at this point.
Thank you, Chairman. What I would just say is what we've previously done at work. If you have a question, just put your card up and we'll call on each person that has a question. I just had a couple of things I'd like to ask. You know, I had some parents, and I know there's been some conversations about, you know, the cost of the land in Palm Beach County and what's happening for new schools. Maybe the idea of co-locating schools, an elementary and a middle school, they share resources. We know in most schools now, once they are built, they start to grow. The library is too small, the cafeteria is too small, the parking lot. The easy thing to put is portables, but those other things are much more difficult. And maybe sharing some of those resources of the playground, the tracks, and all those different things. And then an aspect I see of it, a possibility as parents, for ease of parents, is if they have a child, multiple children, and one changing to another school, different locations is kind of hard. Or what actually gives some people a sense of security is that their child is there with the other one. There's maybe a lack of bullying. They know each other. They know the kids that are there. But that sense of going from 5th to 6th grade is a big step. And obviously the one to 12th is even huge. But that's one thing. And then secondly, I hope when you talk about relocating students that we're always mindful of looking at our boundary committee and where schools where new developments in Palm Beach County are being built. There could be schools even closer, but the boundary committees say they should go to a different school, and we have to look at the capacity at the schools where they were originally earmarked for, because there may be one closer that has capacity, and then we're not overtaxing some of those schools, and I know that's been a topic of discussion in the past. So that's what I have so far. Senator Berman, is it?
Yes.
Question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that presentation. It was really very well done and helpful. So I have a couple different questions on a few of the different parts that we went over right now. And my first question is on school security, so I'm not sure who will answer, but I'd like to acknowledge Chief Kitzrow in the back of the room. We just did a to the point segment, and it was a pleasure to work with you, and I really appreciate all you're doing for Palm Beach County. I noted in the school security slide, I guess it was one of the first slides that we saw today, there's a $5.4 million was spent on municipal officers and sheriff deputies overtime. And I was wondering if we're planning on continuing to use municipal officers and sheriff deputies, or if there's an idea to change to actual school police officers.
We can have Chief Kitzrow, would you please come up and...
Thank you, Senator, for those kind words, too. I enjoyed it as well. It was great to work with you. So the answer to that is yes. We are working to replace those contracts, if you will. But I tell you, I have to say this up front. There's been quite an interesting reaction. As I travel around the county and I talk to the police officers that are working in the schools, overwhelmingly I keep hearing, please don't take my school away from me. Wow. And from the principals I hear, we like our officers, so we're kind of integrating that change in slowly. But yes, we have a very solid plan to replace those contracts and eventually have the school police officers in all of the schools.
Thank you. Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
And then my second question has to do with the presentation regarding the EPS. You have quite a few changes in here that you're asking for, statutory changes. And I just wondered, is there a bill that's already been prepared, and has it been filed, and has somebody been asked to sponsor it?
We have Mr. LaFace, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Berman. Yes, ma'am. Senator Montford just filed a facilities bill for K through 12 that includes all of the issues that were raised in here. Particularly, you know, the local funding, taking it out of the education plant survey, as well as addressing the cost of student station. I can tell you the cost of student station is there's a lot of ideas of how that needs to be, what statutes need to be changed or how that needs to be fixed. But I do think that there's a general consensus that everybody agrees there does need to be a fix. This was a legislative initiative where they really capped the cost of student stations about 3 years ago. Asked EDR to do some surveys and make recommendations. That was all done, but then nobody picked back up the issue and implemented the changes. So there's a number of outstanding changes. So the long answer to that is there is legislation there. We expect changes on the cost of student station, but all of the issues that were raised by Wanda are included in the Montford bill that was just filed. And he is also speaking with the House of Representatives. I know that he met with Chairman Latvala and with Chairman Masulo last week to discuss the facilities, his facilities legislation.
Thank you.
Representative Polsky.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the RLEs. I have, along with Senator Rader, have put forward a bill to raise teacher salaries. And obviously the big question is, how is it going to be paid for? And I understand this might be a great source of revenue. Can you explain, kind of in layman's terms, how it would affect an individual homeowner? Really, what would be the tax increase for an individual?
Yes. So the RLE, you know, currently it's just over 4 mils. If you were to not roll it back, the tax rate itself would stay the same, right? So the impact to the homeowner then becomes, how did their property value change from the prior year? If there was no change, there's really no impact. If they're homesteaded and the property values are on the rise, then they could pay some additional taxes, but there's some safeguards in the Save Our Homes legislation that limits that impact. If it's non-homesteaded property, then, and they see a significant rise in property value, now they're protected by a 10% cap. So they could see, you know, additional taxes with the rise in property value, and then again, if they're homesteaded or not homesteaded, that would really depend on how much that could be. You know, we were able to get our voters in Palm Beach County overwhelmingly supported a 1 mil levy that's going to help us bolster our safety, mental health, and provide some retention supplements to our teachers. You know, that 1 mil, a mil is basically you know, it's $100 per every 100,000 of taxable value. I would expect the RLE, we wouldn't even be seeing that type of growth if you just allowed it to kind of grow from year to year. And I guess it's kind of a tricky question without knowing exactly how much value the house is going to change from 1 year to year, but it would be fairly modest, and if they're homesteaded, then they've got some protection, and it's not going to grow any more than the cost of living or 3%, whatever's lower.
I would just ask if you would work with Representative Polsky and maybe come up with what the average household is in Palm Beach. I mean, we can, a dollar figure for her, I think she'd like to have probably. And I understand it's difficult because every house, but we do everything's on average. So if you could come up with a more specific number for her, I think that's what she was kind of looking for.
Yeah, the average homestead property in Palm Beach County for a single-family home is about $280,000 right now. But I can get you all the information you need. We're well versed in that, having just come off the referendum.
Okay. Representative Casello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here you say the Palm Beach Counties has an A rating with it. What entails an A rating, and how many A-rated schools do we actually have? How many schools are actually A-rated?
Our actual A rating schools, I don't have the exact number with me, but I want to say we're at, with A and B, we're roughly at around 80%, but I can send that information out. When we're saying A-rated district, just as each school gets a rating, a district gets a rating based off those same components. So you add up all of those different components from reading achievement, reading gains, lowest 25%, graduation rates, acceleration, how many kids are getting an accelerated coursework, how many kids are passing that. Add all those components up, and you're getting a rating based on a percent growth. So for a number of years, you saw as school districts, a number of them jumped off because the standards were raised, and a lot of school districts lost A ratings. And then this past year, of the urban school districts, Palm Beach County and Miami-Dade regained that with the growth in student achievement.
Follow-up question. So when a school loses an A rating, I'm just talking from personal experience. I have a school-age daughter who went to Boynton Beach High School. And when we got into the community, it was an A rating. And then they changed the principal, and it went down to a B. They changed the principal, and went down to a C, and it continues to drop. So what's the remedies when a school starts to have those failing from A to B to C? What is the criteria to stop that downward trend and to get it to back where it needs to be?
Sure, great question. As former principal of high school, Boynton Beach High School, hopefully I wasn't the principal when a grade dropped. No, it actually went up when I was there.
Probably wasn't under your administration.
No, a grade actually went up every year I was there. So we did see some changes, you know, when we had FCAT 1.0, FCAT 2.0. So the standards have changed over time. So depending on when your particular child was there, we did see a dip in school grades when those new standards came in place. So when a school grade does drop at a particular school, we do provide additional resources from the central office to provide additional supports to address those issues to get those grades back up. In particular, at the high school level, there are multiple more components than would be at an elementary school when calculating school grades. So it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more nuanced. So again, we're providing additional resources from the central office. We're supporting Boynton Beach High School also at this time.
Just a follow-up question, Chair, if I may. When a school like that starts the downward trend, do students have a tendency to leave that school to a private school? Or I haven't heard the word charter schools mentioned in this presentation yet, but do the students have a tendency to leave that school that might be trending down?
No, actually, a lot of research out there supports that most kids love their home school, not depending upon a particular school grade. If there's the climate and the culture is strong, the relationships that teachers have with kids is strong, we don't see that particular issue where kids are leaving. There are some particular nuances in some statutes where kids do have options to opt out and leave a school. And when we're in a particular issue where a school's rated F or a D, we're not seeing a large number of our kids leave those schools. They're actually staying.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just one more question, if you indulge me. I'd be remiss not to mention their CTA president here in the audience, Mr. Justin Katz, my former colleague there on the Boynton Beach Commission. And I can tell you personally, within the places that we go, in the circles that we run into, that Mr. Katz has promoted these sales tax increases to help the school teachers and help the schools survive and move forward. So I thank you, President Katz.
Representative Caruso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I may, I have two questions. First question is, if we were to allow the RLE local revenue to grow in a natural manner and increase our funding for the county, what assurance do we have that the money will go towards the increase in teachers' pay?
Mr. Oswald, you want to take that?
Yeah. Mr. Rick?
Thanks. Okay, so if you look at the tax base in Florida, let's say it grows by 5 to 6%, that could potentially be a revenue increase that would be near that amount. And if you look at the state economy, it's growing, it has been growing by over 3%, almost 4% per year. But I showed earlier our student funding is only growing by about 1% per year. So we've had to have some fairly modest settlements with Mr. Katz and our teachers. We are very transparent in our budget process. And our school board's going through their budget process now for next school year. And one of their top priorities is improving the compensation of teachers. We have a budget advisory committee that's made up of citizens. We would present any new revenue that came to us, and we've worked hard to contain our costs, and we would be very motivated to find a way to get that money into our teachers' hands. So, you'd have to watch our budget process play out, but having served this board and been a CFO for 20 years in Palm Beach County, I can tell you we'd welcome that revenue. And the only caveat I would say is, in addition to teachers, we'd also like to do more for our bus drivers and our custodians and a lot of our employees that find themselves below that living wage in Palm Beach County. But we could, 80% of our budget is salary and benefits and compensation, and it will naturally find its way into our employees' hands. That's our top priority.
One more follow-up.
So if I could follow up, Mr. Caruso, I can assure you that our school board looks every single year for revenue to compensate our employees. The school district hires over 1,000 new teachers every single year. 1,000 teachers we have to go out and find. This year we couldn't find enough. As Mr. Berker indicated earlier, we have critical shortages in a lot of areas. If we had the additional funding, I guarantee you this board would vote to make sure that we can be competitive and keep our teachers. We lose 50% of our teachers within the first 5 years after we hire them. So we're in a constant go find talent, hire them. They find out they can't live here because we don't pay them enough and they go somewhere else. So I assure you that if you guys allow us to increase the hourly so we can bring more money in, that money will go for our employees, because we have to stop the bleed and keep our teachers in our classrooms rather than have to go find new ones every single year.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
School Board Chair Barbieri, with regards to hiring new teachers and replacing, because a lot of teachers are moving out of the state because of the low income that they earn. Do you know the cost of retraining teachers into your system?
I don't know that. Mr. Burke, you probably know that, don't you?
I don't think we have an exact dollar
Mr.
amount.
Ocava, our head of HR, he probably should know that answer.
Hey, how are you? We don't have that exact figure, but what I can do is I can go back and get that for you.
That would be great, thank you. And Mr. Chair, my second question. With regards to security, the security of our children is paramount, and it's the most important thing, I think, that the school board can provide, even ahead of educating our children. Making sure that they're safe is got to be number one. With regards to the policy, and I want to say I appreciate Palm Beach County's effort to have their own police force for the school system. And in that, my question is, in an active shooter situation, I know that Broward County had a policy whereby the first officer on the scene may or may not, or wasn't required to, it was his or her discretion, to engage the active shooter immediately. And my question is, the Palm Beach County police force, do they have a may or may not or a must engage the active shooter?
Representative Caruso, the chief will answer that, but I just want to tell you, I had the opportunity to witness the active shooter training at Boca High School before the end of last school year, and I saw for a fact that the young officer that was being trained was told to go into that building and do what he had to do because there were children there that needed his help, and he was not to wait. But I'm sure that the chief will follow up on that.
Sir, that's a very good question for us. And I will tell you right up front that we train our officers for single officer response. So we have a police officer on that campus, regardless of the emergency, and especially in a potential catastrophic event, they are trained to move directly towards wherever that danger is coming from. And we model our training based on the federal law enforcement training centers initiatives, and so every officer is required to go through that training, and so that is our policy, that we move directly towards whatever that threat is, understanding that it takes seconds to eliminate that. And if you'd like, I can give you an example of that.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. So I understand the training is the officers are trained to engage, but is it set policy that they must engage?
It is.
Oh, thank you.
Can I just follow in with a quick question? It's the same question he has. I think it's may versus shall. So the policy in the Palm Beach County School District for the officers, it says shall, not may.
Shall. You shall respond and you shall engage. And just as an example, we had that incident at one of our high schools the first week of football season. Wasn't a school shooting, but it was on the campus property. And there was a test of our shall policy, and the first officer was at that location where the shooting occurred within 7 seconds. All the officers on the team moved to that shooting location.
That was Atlantic High School?
No.
Palm Beach Central.
Palm
Beach Central.
I have a follow-up in the same line of question.
You
Can I
said one.
do it, or just you want
You
to
said
get me
one.
to me later?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you. You know, one of the things that
have a
upset the
question.
Parkland families greatly in the community, and being that I represent all of Parkland and Northern Coral Springs, is reading in the Parkland Task Force findings and seeing the videos of officers putting on their bullet vests and getting prepared and spending 5 minutes getting them prepared while they're hearing shots happening. So the question is presented, I present the question, is it to get there and get into that building, whether it's in Columbine or Sandy Hook or in Parkland or, God forbid, anywhere in Palm Beach County? Is it to get into that building, or is it to also prepare them to get in?
No, they are already in the building. They're already on the campus. They're provided with the equipment, and they're required to have that equipment on them to be able to move quickly. The preparation is done all ahead of time. Now, when you have secondary, third units responding, you know, from other jurisdictions, I can't account for what they're doing. But I can tell you that the school district police department, we're trained to move right away. There's no other equipment to move on. And when you think about that, that's a pretty tall order that we're asking our officers to do. We're asking them to move by themselves down the hall in an environment with the equipment that they have with them and engage a potential active shooter on campus. And so that's what they're trained to do, that's what they're committed to do, that's what they're equipped to do, and that's what they will do.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to deviate from school safety by any means, but I would like to recognize Senator Gail Harrell, our fourth senator, who joined us today. If you'd just like to introduce yourself quickly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm State Senator Gail Harrell. I represent District 25, which includes Martin, St. Lucie, and parts of Palm Beach County, including Jupiter Farms, the acreage, and the city of Pahokee. And it's a delight to be here. And I apologize for being so late. I had a St. Lucie County delegation meeting earlier this morning, and this is the first opportunity to get down here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Representative Schlossberg, is that your card? Or Senator Berman? Senator Berman, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a different question, more going back to the issue about teachers and the teacher shortages. There's also been some publicity that part of the teacher shortages are resulting from a new certification exam that we are requiring teachers to take. And could you speak to whether we have had some attrition because of the certification exam, and what the numbers have been, and if you have any suggestions regarding the certification exam?
Yeah, it's not that it's a new certification. The certification exam was revised, and we do have a large number of teachers who are not passing that exam to get their permanent certification. Dr. LeCotte, I don't know if he has the exact numbers, but we can get you the exact numbers, but it is a particular issue. It is one of our legislative priorities is on there to look at alternative ways for certifications for teachers, including just looking at different pathways to open that up. But it is a particular issue here in Palm Beach County for a number of our teachers, and we can get you those exact numbers.
Follow up, Mr.
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is there a legislative fix that you think for the certification issue that you would like us to look at in Tallahassee?
Yeah, some of the issues that we've been having internal conversations and are around looking at, one, either even eliminating the certification exam, looking at teacher evaluation as a potential, allowing a principal to make that judgment based on their performance in, or a performance-based type of an assessment that could exist between a principal, assistant principal with that teacher that allows them for a sign-off as an alternative pathway. And Dr. LeCotte, I don't know if you had any additional that you want to add, alternative ways to look at certification issues.
So I just came in the door, so I think somebody was asking about how many teachers we possibly could lose to the certification test. So right now we have about 334 teachers that if they do not pass the test, they would be lost, they would be leaving our district. So we have a remediation class that we are providing for them. We hired a consultant, so they are taking classes on Saturdays to save their jobs. Second question?
Just alternative legislation that we would look at for certification issues. We talked about performance-based, potentially looking at teacher evaluation.
Sure.
As ways to, another alternative for teachers to get their permanent certification.
Sure, I know that I'm part of a teacher table and with the Department of Education, and we are also looking at ways to provide teachers with alternative ways. One is a portfolio method, which if they don't pass the regular test, we can look at a portfolio method with a principal, watches them and provides classes for them for over 2 years and then signs off on them and then they keep them, different types of remediation. And I know that there's 4 subgroups in the Department of Education right now that we are tasked with looking at alternative ways to find teachers, keep teachers, select teachers. So this conversation's a huge one.
Thank you. Okay, I was just Madam Speaker.
Yes, on the certification, is there a training for teachers that are being recertified? So, you're talking about remediation to get them to take the test again, but is there any preparation prior to them taking that?
So we are working with the university systems, so hopefully they can train them and pass the test before they leave the university system. We hope by their junior year they could be done with that. When they come to our school system, we try to get them into the classroom, and then we have to start remediating them with what we have, which is we have a consulting group called Learning Liaison, which goes over the test, helps them to study the math questions. Most of them are failing the essays or the math component of it. So we're remediating them in those areas. But we don't have a specific class just to remediate the 334 classes. That's why we've had to use some funds from budget that they've been so very kind to give us to do this type of stuff. Does that answer your question?
So it's a little perplexing to me to hear that we're having a teacher shortage because we've been told in Tallahassee there's a problem. I sat on an education board the last 2 years, and the DOE told us that 32% of the teachers are leaving the education system within 5 years. So if we know the problem in Tallahassee, somehow we're not working towards making sure of fixing it. When I brought up things of maybe such as like a teacher loan forgiveness if you stayed in the system for 5 years, or some kind of housing incentives or something, or just different things. But I understand there's got to be something different because, as I mentioned at our last meeting here about the cost of living in Palm Beach County, it's not the same as every other county. So when you talk about teacher salaries, we're averaging, and I know the bill that you bring up does the national average of salaries, but it's a little different here. Palm Beach County is not a cheap place to live, and our teachers coming out of college with debt, trying to buy a house, start a family, is about the time they start quitting because they have to move on to something else. So I understand that, and I think that's why the question was so serious about if we got you more funds, is there a guarantee we can put it into the teacher's pocket to help them live in Palm Beach County and continue to work here? Senator Rader, did you have something else?
Thank you. I know we're kind of running out of time. I'm going to add 2 quick questions. First, to the school district, I believe there's a lawsuit against charters that's still out there, or did it get settled? Is it pending? Can you give us an update on where that is?
Senator Rader, we've been instructed by our general counsel that since there is pending litigation against the school board, we should not comment on the charter school litigation today. So I'm sure that the general counsel's office can fill you guys in separately, but to make a public discussion of it, we can't do that today.
Okay, thank you. And the second, I didn't know that, or I wouldn't have asked the question. The second thing was, I just found out kind of recently, according to the Trump tax cuts, that when school teachers, if they itemize their expenses, could write off when they purchase supplies for their room, they can't write those expenses off anymore. Is there anything in the school district, does the school district know about that? And is there anything to kind of help teachers? Because every teacher I've ever met and I've spoken to always puts their own money into their classroom buying whatever, paper, erasers, chalk, supplies of whatever sort. Is there anything that the school district can do to help teachers with those type of expenses now that they can't deduct them?
Yeah. Well, first thing we do is we do administer the teacher lead program, which is for classroom supplies that the legislature approves each year, and that's providing about $300 per teacher for them to buy classroom supplies and hopefully reduce the amount that might be coming out of their pocket. We cannot do anything on a federal tax level, But we have worked, we're working on our budget for next year, and one of the things we're excited about is for the first time in a long time, we're actually going to be able to, thanks to our referendum, increase our supply budgets for teachers in the music of art and music. The fine arts are part of that referendum and supported. So we will hopefully, the teachers will have a little bit more money within the school budget to work from and be less dependent on their own resources.
And I do want to just add locally here, our Education Foundation has red apple supply. So teachers, a number of our schools participate. It's a huge warehouse of lots of teacher supplies that they can access.
Go ahead.
So we structured this today so that the legislators could ask all the questions, but I know that a few of you would like to make a couple comments. Keep in mind we have 12 minutes, and Chairman Wilhite wants to end on a certain note, so would you be brief if you have anything to say at that end of the dais so that we can make sure that any board members would like to say anything, the legislators have the opportunity?
I yield my minutes.
I would love to make just one really brief kind of framing of this conversation that means something to me. I've spent some time in a few of my schools recently where we have been really impacted by the teacher shortage. And what I want to share with you all is that when there's a teacher shortage, it doesn't affect schools equally. What happens is that if a teacher goes to the best school that they can, where the kids are the easiest to teach. And so when you're at a school where they have extra challenges, and our children come to us with a lot of challenges just from their families and their lives, those are going to be the hardest schools to staff. One of my middle schools had 20 teachers that they needed at the beginning of the school year. After 6 months of the principal working diligently to try to pick up anyone to fill these spaces, we still have 5 teachers in critical shortage areas missing at this school, which means that those students have been sitting in those classrooms with permanent substitutes, which means they're teachers that are not necessarily skilled to teach these students and could disappear at any moment and could be changed at any moment. That is particularly difficult for a student who also has other challenges in their life. So as we think about these needs and the way that they are spread throughout the county, I want you to keep in mind that not having enough teachers around the board means that we have to take anybody we can get and we have to put them into classrooms where the need may be really high and the students may need extra skills, not less skills in them. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you all being here today with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to bring us back to the issue of the educational plant survey. While we're working on a legislative fix, I want to share with you collectively a situation that is going on in our district right now. Last year, our school board very boldly closed down Odyssey Middle School with the intent of moving and renovating the school to put South Tech Academy, a conversion charter school. Yes, a conversion charter school. That's an excellent charter school. That's a vocational school into that facility, and we are working with South Tech now to build out the facility. However, an unintended consequence is that we found that we could not build a new middle school further west to serve the students that were attending Odyssey Middle School. We're trying to build a school that would serve children in Representative Schlossberg and Representative Polsky's districts, which is right by the canyons. It's by Sunset Palms. We were told that we cannot build it, that the students, the Department of Education has told us that we can send the children northeast to Riviera Beach or south all the way down in the south end of Delray Beach. And when they've come out to take a look also at, that area, they looked at what transportation time would be. And what they did is they came during the summertime when all my 55 plus people are not back. It's impossible to move around. So there you have a situation where we've worked with the charter school to give them the facility that will really enhance what they're doing because they just do a fabulous job for us. And yet now we cannot build a school to accommodate the students that have been displaced. So I look forward to you working with us and helping us with that matter. Thank you.
And I'd like to say thank you to our delegation for continuing to support us as we look at vocational and technical education programs. The monies that we received through the years for West Tech has put that campus back in swing with welding, carpentry, mechatronics, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, health programs. We really need to look at more funding, more appropriations for funding. We have to start with children at elementary and middle school. Everybody's not going to college. Many students want to find something that they truly like to do, and if we can get additional funding to put more programs at the elementary, middle school, as well as the high school level, and especially building back the vocational programs here in Palm Beach County, it's a must. And I thank you because you answered us a few years ago, and we are continually wanting you to bring that as a priority, vocational and technical schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us out. I especially want to thank my Senator Bobby Powell, who always listens to me and shares the same passion for education that I have. So I have several things that I want to say, and I'm happy to meet with anybody anytime about educating our children. So first is, the studies don't show that teachers leave teaching because of money. They leave because it is hard work, right? And so the question that was asked about guaranteeing that the money goes directly in teachers' pockets, while I fully support our teachers getting more money, I want to support our teachers and other staff in other ways to make that lift easier for them so that they can enjoy teaching. I want you to know that what has destroyed public education is a high-stakes accountability system. If you want to save public education, fix that thing. That's a one-on-one. Okay, so let me come back. So in terms of the certification, I'm so glad Senator Berman brought that up. So I visit schools, and principals tell me about teachers that have been in classrooms with their temporary certification who have done an outstanding job but cannot pass the test to get their permanent certification, with data that shows that they are educating children, but they themselves have trouble passing that test. And this is a change that seemed to happen 2 years ago. So number 3, I want you to know there's a university in Palm Beach County that I shall not name that 2 years ago, 50% of their College of Education graduates were failing the certification test, 50%. So this is like a whole pipeline issue that we have to address. Fourth, I hope that you will support, and it is on our legislative agenda, the Black History Museum at the historic Roosevelt High School. That is something that will be a real star for Palm Beach County. I also want to thank you in advance for supporting the next version of the appropriations from the Riviera Beach Pre-K Collaborative. And again, I want to thank Senator Powell for taking the lead on making sure that children in Riviera Beach, many, many more, get a high-quality early childhood education. So the other thing that you can do is look at that whole VPK thing, because that's madness for this part-time education. Okay, I see you, Barbieri. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to say is you will receive a letter from the Riviera Beach Pre-K Collaborative about problems with this new portal. The problem is somewhere between the Office of Early Learning and the Early Learner Coalition. I think both entities have responsibility, but it's a problem that is negatively impacting the ability of children on subsidized early education to receive their education. Thank you for listening.
Mrs. McQuinn, did you have anything?
No, she's
okay. So if I can just,
I did yield my time, but I also want to add my advocacy for the career and technical education. My fellow board members know that I've spoken about this at our meetings, and we don't have anything for our North County, which includes Riviera Beach and parts of West Palm. We don't have opportunities for them to have vocational and career and technical education. So I'm happy to see that at the federal and state level that has become a priority.
Ask Mr. Barbieri, 30 seconds, you can time me. 2 specific legislative issues that would help us with recruiting teachers. The first one is consider legislation that would allow retired teachers who've left from drop and left to be able to come back and return to teaching without having to stay out for a period of time. And the second one is, on the issue of certification, consider a way to look at performance-based certification as a way to encourage more people to come into education and to stay into education, as Dr. Robinson said.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, my final comment would be that there was some concern about security, and I just wanted, first of all, most of you know I was a former police officer, so you know I've been there. But one of the benefits that we have, as opposed to some of the other districts, is we do have an excellent police department, and the officers in our schools become friends with those children. So it's not a question of these officers having to go in and save children they don't know. These are officers that go in there. They've been in that school every single day. They know those kids, and they treat those kids like they're their own. So there's no question that an officer has been working with those children in that school is not going to go in and try and help them, because they know those kids, and those kids depend on those officers to protect them. So we take security in our schools extremely seriously. We have one of the finest police departments probably in the entire country, which is our school board police department. But those officers are absolutely dedicated to the children that they see every single day of the week. They are in the school. Our goal is to get 3 officers in every high school, 2 in every middle school, and one in every elementary school. We currently have 1 in every single one of our schools, as the chief said, and we have multiple officers in some of our larger schools. But we will make sure that the children that are delivered to us in the morning get delivered back to their parents at the end of the day safely, and that's our objective, and it's a paramount goal of this school board, is to make sure that happens.
Anyone else here? So I'll just close on, I appreciate your comments about the numbers there, because some of these high schools have over 3,000 kids in them, and there's some small cities that have a larger police force than we have per capita. I mean, that just seems unusual to have that many kids at one location and only have 1 officer there. So I'm happy and encouraged to hear that I know before there was a number thrown at 1 per 1,000, but even more than that, or to have a specific number is awesome. And then just finally, I know it's I don't have to read your mission statement. It's the normal thing: educate our kids, feed our kids, and keep our kids safe. And as Representative Caruso said today, in today's day and age, it's kind of backwards. We need to worry more about having them safety, giving them good, healthy, balanced meals, and educating them. It seems like the direction we're going, and that's unfortunate in today's educational system that we're going that way. And so, and then in final closing, I appreciate your working with me and meeting with me and talking to me. And I would encourage all of my colleagues and all of yours as well to try and meet with us more and outside to have better dialogue and a better working relationship. And with that, I appreciate meeting with you. And I would like to say at the conclusion of this meeting, which is now at 4 o'clock, we will have a joint meeting with the Palm Beach County League of Cities as well. We'll stand in recess until then.